The evening sky had turned a deep purple as Samira packed up her study materials from the university library. Her eyes burned from staring at law textbooks for the past 5 hours. Finals week was brutal, especially for pre-law students, but Samira wasn't one to complain. She had worked too hard to get here. "You're the last one again," the librarian said with a kind smile as Samira walked past the front desk. "Big test tomorrow," Samira replied, adjusting her backpack. "Constitutional law waits for no one." The campus was quiet as she made her way to the student parking lot. Most people had already gone home or were out enjoying their Thursday night. Not Samira. She had promised her father she would make the most of this opportunity, and she intended to keep that promise. Her old blue Honda started with a slight sputter. The car had seen better days, but it was reliable enough to get her to and from campus. The dashboard clock read 11:20 p.m. The drive home would take about 20 minutes if traffic was light, which it usually was this late. Samira turned on the radio, keeping the volume low. Some soft indie rock played as she navigated through the empty campus streets. Once on the main road, she relaxed a little, rolling down her window to let in the cool spring air. She was about 10 minutes from her apartment when she noticed flashing lights in her rearview mirror. Her heart jumped a little. Samira checked her speed, 42 in a 45 zone. She wasn't speeding. Maybe a taillight was out? Pulling over to the side of the road, she took a deep breath. This wasn't her first traffic stop, and she knew the drill. License and registration ready, hands visible on the steering wheel. Be polite, but know your rights. 2 officers approached her car, one on each side. The taller one, a man with a crew cut and a stern expression, shined his flashlight directly into her face. Samira squinted against the harsh light. "License and registration," he said without introducing himself or explaining why he'd pulled her over. "May I ask why I've been stopped, officer?" Samira asked, keeping her voice steady. "License and registration first," he repeated, his tone sharper. Samira nodded, reaching slowly for her glove compartment. "I'm just getting my registration," she explained, opening it and retrieving the document. She then carefully reached for her purse on the passenger seat to get her license. "What are you doing out this late?" the second officer asked. He was shorter with broad shoulders and a thick mustache. His nameplate read Officer Reeves. "I was studying at the university library. I'm headed home now," Samira replied, handing over her documents. The first officer, whose nameplate read Officer Dawson, examined her license with a frown. "This address current?" "Yes, sir." "You live in Westwood Apartments?" "Pretty nice place for a student," Officer Dawson remarked, his eyebrow raised. "I have roommates," Samira explained. Though she wasn't sure why that mattered, Officer Reeves was peering into her back seat with his flashlight. "What's in the backpack?" "Just books and my laptop." "I was studying. Mind if we take a look?" Officer Reeves asked, though it didn't sound much like a question. Samira hesitated. She knew they needed a warrant or her consent to search her car, and she hadn't done anything wrong. But something about the officer's demeanor made her nervous. "May I ask what this is about? I don't believe I was speeding or breaking any traffic laws." Officer Dawson leaned down, his face now level with her window. "Your left taillight is flickering. But now I'm curious why you're so reluctant to let us look in your bag. Got something to hide?" "No, sir, I don't, but I know my rights. And I don't consent to a search without probable cause." Samira's voice trembled slightly, but she maintained eye contact. The officers exchanged glances. "Step out of the car." "Please," Officer Dawson said. Samira's heart was pounding now. "Am I being detained? Or am I free to go?" "Just step out of the car, miss. We need to check if you're under the influence. You're acting suspicious." Samira knew she wasn't under the influence of anything except maybe too much caffeine from her study session, but she also knew that refusing could escalate the situation. Carefully, she opened her door and stepped out. "Stand over here." Officer Dawson directed her to the side of the road while Officer Reeves began shining his flashlight around the interior of her car. "Officer, I have not given consent for you to search my vehicle," Samira stated firmly. "We're not searching, just looking," Officer Reeves replied with a smirk. "Plain view doctrine," Samira pulled out her phone. "I'm going to record this interaction for my own protection." "Put the phone away," Officer Dawson snapped. "I have the right to record this," Samira replied, her finger hovering over the record button. Officer Dawson stepped closer. "I said put it away, now." Feeling her hands shake, Samira pressed record and held the phone at her side, still capturing audio. "Where are you from originally?" Officer Dawson asked, crossing his arms. "I was born in Philadelphia," Samira answered, confused by the question. "No, I mean, where is your family from? Before America?" Samira felt a knot form in her stomach. "My father was born in Taiwan. My mother is from here. May I ask why that's relevant to a traffic stop?" Officer Reeves had moved to the trunk of her car. "Just making conversation. You speak Chinese?" "My father speaks Mandarin." "I know a little," Samira replied coolly. "Again, I fail to see how this is relevant." "We've had some issues with international students bringing in contraband," Officer Dawson explained with a shrug. "Just doing our job. I'm not an international student. I was born in Philadelphia, as I said. I'm an American citizen." Samira could feel anger building beneath her fear. Officer Reeves rejoined them, having apparently given up on finding anything in the car. "Your taillight is definitely flickering. Could be a safety hazard. Thank you for letting me know." "I'll get it fixed tomorrow," Samira said, hoping this meant they were done. "We're going to run your information. Make sure everything checks out," Officer Dawson said. Walking back to their patrol car with her license and registration, Samira stood in the cool night air, still recording with her phone. She noticed a few cars passing by, slowing down to look at the scene. She felt humiliated standing there on the side of the road, being treated like a criminal when all she had done was drive home from studying. After what seemed like an eternity, Officer Dawson returned. "Your record's clean," he said, sounding almost disappointed as he handed back her documents. "Am I free to go now?" Samira asked. "Yeah, you can go. But get that taillight fixed immediately. Next time it'll be a ticket." Officer Dawson's tone was dismissive. "And maybe don't be out so late by yourself," Officer Reeves added with what she guessed was supposed to be concern. "Not safe for a young lady." Samira nodded, not trusting herself to speak without saying something she might regret. She got back into her car, her hands still shaking as she put the key in the ignition. As the officers walked back to their patrol car, she heard Officer Reeves laugh and say something to Officer Dawson. She couldn't make out the words, but their body language told her enough. She waited until they had pulled away before letting out a long, shaky breath. Then, sitting in her parked car, she checked her phone to make sure the recording had saved properly. It had. Samira sat there for several minutes trying to process what had just happened. This wasn't the first time she'd been profiled, but it never got easier. The questions about her ethnicity, the baseless suspicion, the intimidation tactics, all for a supposedly flickering taillight that she wasn't even sure was actually flickering. When she finally felt calm enough to drive, she pulled back onto the road carefully. The rest of the journey home passed in a blur as she replayed the interaction in her mind. By the time she reached her apartment, Samira had made a decision. She wasn't going to let this go. Too many people experienced this kind of treatment and said nothing because they felt powerless or afraid. She had been studying law for a reason. She believed in justice and due process. And while she didn't have much power as a student, she did have knowledge. She knew her rights had been violated tonight and she had it all recorded. As she parked her car and gathered her things, Samira felt a strange mix of anger and determination. What those officers didn't know when they decided to harass her tonight was that she wasn't just any pre-law student. And they certainly had no idea who her father was or what he did for a living. Tomorrow, after her exam, she would start making calls. This wouldn't be swept under the rug like so many other incidents. Not this time. Little did those officers know. Their routine harassment of a young woman would soon lead to consequences they never anticipated, all because of who Samira's father was and the power he wielded in this city. Samira barely slept that night. Her mind kept replaying the traffic stop, the officers' smug faces and the feeling of helplessness that washed over her despite knowing her rights. By the time her alarm went off at 6:30 a.m., she had maybe gotten 3 hours of broken sleep. "You look terrible," her roommate Lily said when Samira emerged from her bedroom. Lily was already dressed for her morning shift at the coffee shop, her hair tied back in a neat ponytail. "Thanks," Samira mumbled, heading straight for the coffee pot. "Had a rough night. Pre-exam jitters?" Samira poured herself a cup and leaned against the counter. "No, got pulled over by the police on my way home." Lily's eyes widened. "Why?" "Supposedly for a flickering taillight. Samira took a sip of her coffee. But they spent more time asking about my ethnicity and trying to search my car than they did checking my actual taillight. Are you serious? That's messed up. Lily sat down at their small kitchen table. Did you get their badge numbers? Samira nodded. Got that and more. I recorded most of it on my phone. Good. What are you going to do? It was the question Samira had been asking herself all night. She knew what she should do. File a formal complaint, follow proper channels, trust the system to work. That's what her father would advise. But she also knew how these complaints usually ended, buried in paperwork and eventually dismissed. I'm going to file a complaint, she finally said. After my exam, Lily checked her watch. Speaking of which, shouldn't you be getting ready? Constitutional law at 9 now, right? Samira nodded, gulping down the rest of her coffee. She needed to focus. This exam was worth 30% of her final grade, and she couldn't afford to be distracted. 3 hours later, Samira walked out of the exam hall feeling oddly hollow. She'd prepared for weeks, knew the material inside and out, but today she'd struggled to concentrate. The questions blurred together, and she kept thinking about Officers Dawson and Reeves instead of due process and equal protection. She found a quiet bench on campus and pulled out her phone. The recording was still there. She played it back, wincing at the sound of the officers' voices. It was all there. The questions about her ethnicity, the attempt to search without consent, the intimidation. Samira opened her contacts and hovered her thumb over her father's name. Judge Robert Chen would know exactly what to do. He'd been dealing with cases like this for years, first as a civil rights attorney and now as a federal judge. But something held her back. Her father had always been protective, perhaps overly so since her mother died. If she told him about this, he might try to handle it himself. Make calls, pull strings. And while that might get results, it wasn't the way Samira wanted to do things. She wanted to stand on her own. Instead, she called the police. Department's non-emergency line. I'd like to file a complaint about officer misconduct, she said, when the operator answered. You'll need to come to the station in person for that, the woman on the other end informed her. Bring ID and any evidence you might have. I'll be there in an hour, Samira replied. She texted Lily that she would be late getting home, then caught the bus downtown to the main police station. The building was imposing, all concrete and tinted glass. Samira took a deep breath before walking through the front doors. The lobby was busy with officers coming and going, civilians waiting in plastic chairs, phones ringing. Samira approached the front desk where a middle-aged man in uniform was typing on a computer. I'd like to file a complaint, she said. The officer didn't look up. Form's over there. He gestured vaguely toward a rack of papers on the wall. Samira took a complaint form and found an empty seat. The form was surprisingly short, with small boxes for information and only a few lines for the actual complaint. How was she supposed to explain what happened in 3 tiny lines? She filled out the basic information, her name, contact details, the date and time of the incident, the officers' names. For the complaint itself, she simply wrote, Officers Dawson and Reeves pulled me over for a flickering taillight, then proceeded to question me about my ethnicity, attempted to search my vehicle without consent, and intimidated me when I tried to record the interaction. I have audio evidence of this encounter. When she returned the form to the desk officer, he glanced at it briefly. Someone will contact you. When? Samira asked. The officer shrugged. Depends on the workload. Could be a few days, could be a few weeks, and is there someone I can speak to now? I have evidence I'd like to share. The officer looked annoyed but picked up his phone. After a brief conversation, he pointed to a door. Lieutenant Walsh will see you. Down the hall, 3rd door on the right. Lieutenant Walsh turned out to be a woman in her 40s with short gray hair and tired eyes. She gestured for Samira to sit across from her desk. Officer Garcia says you have a complaint and evidence. Samira nodded and slid the form across the desk. I also have a recording of the encounter. She held up her phone. Lieutenant Walsh read the form quickly. Officers Dawson and Reeves, she muttered. Let's hear the recording. Samira played the audio. The lieutenant's expression remained neutral, but her eyes narrowed slightly at certain points. When it was finished, she leaned back in her chair. I'll look into this. We take complaints about officer conduct very seriously. Something in her tone made Samira doubt that. What happens now? We'll investigate. Talk to the officers involved. Review any dashcam footage, consider your evidence. If we find misconduct, appropriate disciplinary action will be taken. And if you don't find misconduct? Lieutenant Walsh's smile didn't reach her eyes. Then the complaint will be dismissed. But don't worry, we're very thorough. Samira left the station feeling unsatisfied. The lieutenant had taken a copy of her recording, but Samira couldn't shake the feeling that her complaint would end up in a drawer somewhere, forgotten. Back at her apartment, she found Lily and their other roommate, Tran, sitting on the couch watching TV. How'd it go? Lily asked, muting the show. Samira dropped her backpack on the floor and collapsed into an armchair. About as well as expected. They took my statement and the recording, but I doubt anything will come of it. You should post it online, Tran suggested. Get some attention on it. That's the only way things change these days. I don't know. She's right, Lily chimed in. If you post that recording, it'll get shared. The department will have to respond. Samira hesitated. Going public hadn't been her plan. She believed in working through proper channels. But what if those channels were designed to protect the officers, not her? I'll think about it, she finally said. That night, after tossing and turning for hours, Samira made a decision. She created a new social media account, one not linked to her real name, and uploaded the audio recording with a simple caption. Pulled over for a flickering taillight. Listen to what these officers really wanted to know. By morning, the post had been shared hundreds of times. By afternoon, thousands. Comments flooded in from people sharing similar experiences, expressing outrage, tagging local news outlets and city officials. Meanwhile, at the police station, Officers Dawson and Reeves were called into Lieutenant Walsh's office. What's this about a complaint? Dawson asked, looking unconcerned. Some girl says you profiled her during a traffic stop, Walsh explained. Says you asked about her ethnicity, tried to search without cause. Reeves snorted. We were doing our job. Had a tip about drug activity in that area involving foreign students. We were following up. She recorded it, Walsh said, her voice flat. So what? We didn't do anything wrong, Dawson insisted. She's also posted it online. It's going viral. That got their attention. What? Reeves looked alarmed. She can't do that. She can and she did. The chief's office is getting calls. The mayor's office too. It was a routine stop, Dawson protested. This is getting blown out of proportion. Walsh pushed a paper across her desk. Tell that to her father. Dawson picked up the paper. His face paled as he read the name. Judge Robert Chen? The federal judge? His voice cracked slightly. Walsh nodded. The same. How were we supposed to know who her father was? Reeves demanded. You weren't, Walsh replied. You were supposed to treat every citizen with respect and follow proper procedure regardless of who their father might be. As the officers left Walsh's office, their confident swagger was gone. What they had dismissed as a nuisance complaint was rapidly becoming a career-threatening situation. Back at her apartment, unaware of the panicked conversations happening at the police station, Samira was finally getting a response from the system. Her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. Is this Samira Chen? A woman's voice asked when she answered. Yes, who's calling? This is Diane Powell from the Office of Professional Standards. We've received your complaint and would like to set up a formal interview as soon as possible. The wheels of justice, it seemed, had finally started turning, and they were moving much faster than anyone had expected. Samira's phone hadn't stopped buzzing for the past 24 hours. News outlets were requesting interviews. Community activists were offering support. Even her classmates, who somehow connected her to the viral recording despite her anonymous account, were reaching out with messages of solidarity. But the call she had been dreading finally came as she was walking out of her afternoon class. Samira. Her father's voice was calm, controlled, his courtroom voice. We need to talk. Her stomach dropped. Dad, Not over the phone, Judge Chen interrupted. I'll pick you up in 20 minutes. Outside your constitutional law building. Before she could respond, he had hung up. Samira stared at her phone, a mix of emotions washing over her. She had hoped to handle this herself, to prove she could stand on her own. But a small part of her was relieved. Her father always knew what to do. 20 minutes later, a sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb. Samira recognized her father's car immediately. As she approached, the back door opened. Judge Robert Chen didn't look angry as she slid into the seat beside him. If anything, he looked tired. At 58, his hair was more salt than pepper these days, and the lines around his eyes had deepened since she'd last seen him 2 weeks ago. "Why didn't you call me?" he asked once they were moving. Samira looked down at her hands.
"I wanted to handle it myself. By posting the recording online."
Now there was a hint of disapproval in his voice. "That wasn't my first choice," she defended. "I filed a complaint properly. I went to the station. I followed the rules. But the lieutenant who took my statement didn't seem to care." Her father was quiet for a moment, processing. "Tell me everything," he finally said. "From the beginning." So she did. She described the traffic stop, the officer's behavior, her attempt to record the interaction, and the dismissive response at the station. As she spoke, her father's expression remained neutral, but she could see the muscle in his jaw tighten. "I'm meeting with Chief Richards this afternoon," he said when she finished. "I'd like you to come with me." "Dad, I don't want special treatment because of who you are," Samira protested. Judge Chen turned to look at her directly. "This isn't about special treatment, Samira. This is about accountability. Those officers crossed a line, and they would have done so regardless of whose daughter you were. The difference is you have a platform and a voice that others in your situation might not have. We can use that to make sure this doesn't happen to someone else." Samira considered this. She hadn't thought of it that way. That her connection to her father could be a tool for broader change rather than just personal advantage. "Okay," she agreed. "I'll come." 2 hours later, they sat in Police Chief Richards' office. The chief was a broad-shouldered man with a carefully maintained appearance, from his pressed uniform to his precisely trimmed mustache. He had greeted Judge Chen warmly. They clearly knew each other. But his smile faltered when he saw Samira. "Judge Chen, Miss Chen," the chief began, settling behind his desk. "I want to assure you that we're taking this matter very seriously." "I should hope so," Judge Chen replied. "My daughter was racially profiled by your officers, who then attempted to conduct an illegal search and intimidated her when she exercised her right to document the interaction." Chief Richards shifted uncomfortably. "We're still investigating the incident. Officers Dawson and Reeves claim they had reasonable suspicion based on an anonymous tip about drug activity in the area. That doesn't explain why they asked about my ethnicity or where my family is from," Samira pointed out. "No, it doesn't," the chief conceded, "which is why both officers have been placed on administrative duty pending a full investigation." "Administrative duty?" Judge Chen raised an eyebrow. "Not leave. Standard procedure, Judge. We need them available for interviews as part of the investigation." Samira leaned forward. "What does this investigation involve exactly?" Chief Richards turned to her, seemingly surprised by her direct question. "We're reviewing your complaint, the audio recording, dashcam footage, and interviewing both officers separately. The Office of Professional Standards is handling it, not the officers' direct supervisors." "And the timeline?" Judge Chen asked. 2 weeks for the initial investigation, then review by the Civilian Oversight Board." Samira exchanged a glance with her father. That was faster than she had expected. "And what happens when the investigation concludes?" she asked. The chief folded his hands on his desk. "If misconduct is found, disciplinary action will be taken, ranging from reprimand to termination depending on the severity. And training," Judge Chen added. "There needs to be department-wide training on implicit bias and proper stop procedures. We already have. Clearly it's not effective," the judge interrupted. "My daughter's experience is not unique, Chief. The only unique aspect is that she had the means and knowledge to document it and the platform to make it heard. How many others have suffered similar treatment without recourse?" The chief didn't have an answer for that. As they left the police headquarters, Samira felt a mix of hope and skepticism. "Do you think anything will actually change?" she asked her father. "It depends," he replied, "on how much pressure is maintained, on how committed the leadership truly is to reform, and on whether people like you continue to speak up." Back at her apartment, Samira found her roommates waiting anxiously. "How did it go?" Lily asked, jumping up from the couch. "Better than I expected," Samira admitted, dropping her bag. "The officers are on administrative duty, and there's an actual investigation happening." "Because of your dad?" Tran asked, always the pragmatist. Samira sighed. "Partly, yes, but also because of the public attention. The recording has over 100,000 views now. And what about those officers? Lily asked. Have they tried to contact you? No, and they better not, Samira said firmly. Meanwhile, across town, Officers Dawson and Reeves sat in a small break room, uniforms on but badges and guns locked away, the visible sign of their administrative duty status. This is ridiculous, Dawson muttered, staring into his coffee cup. All this over a routine stop. Reeves looked less confident. You heard that recording. We messed up, man. Asking about her ethnicity? What were we thinking? We were doing our job, Dawson insisted, following up on a tip. The tip didn't say anything about Asian students, Reeves pointed out. That was all us. Dawson fell silent, unable to argue the point. And now we're in the crosshairs of a federal judge, Reeves continued. Do you know what Judge Chen's reputation is? He's ruthless when it comes to civil rights violations. Half the consent decrees in this state have his signature on them. It's not like he's presiding over our case, Dawson scoffed. No, but he has the ear of everyone who matters in this city. The mayor, the DA, the chief, they all know him. And now thanks to that viral video, the public is watching too. Down the hall, Lieutenant Walsh was reviewing the dashcam footage from the night of Samira's stop. The video confirmed everything in Samira's audio recording. Plus it showed Officer Reeves clearly looking through the car windows with his flashlight, going beyond the plain view he had claimed. Walsh paused the footage and sighed. She had worked with Dawson and Reeves for years. They weren't bad cops exactly, but they had developed bad habits that no one had checked. Until now, her phone rang. Chief Richards, how bad is it? He asked without preamble when she answered. Bad enough, Walsh replied honestly. The dashcam backs up everything in her complaint. They had no legitimate reason to ask about her ethnicity or try to search the vehicle. There was silence on the other end for a moment. Recommendations? Walsh didn't hesitate. Suspension without pay for both. Mandatory retraining before reinstatement and a formal apology to Miss Chen. Judge Chen wants more than that, the chief said. He's talking about department-wide training reforms. He might be right, Walsh admitted. Dawson and Reeves aren't the only ones who need a refresher on constitutional policing. After hanging up, Walsh returned to the video footage. Something about the case bothered her beyond the obvious misconduct. It was the way both officers had reacted when they learned who Samira's father was. Shocked, yes, but not remorseful. Only concerned about consequences to themselves. That attitude was the real problem, and Walsh wasn't sure a suspension and retraining would fix it. Across campus in the law library, Samira was struggling to focus on her studies. The meeting with the police chief kept replaying in her mind. She believed her complaint was being taken seriously now, but she couldn't help wondering, what about all the people who didn't have a federal judge for a father? What about those whose complaints disappeared into filing cabinets never to be addressed? Her phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. This is Zoe Walker from the Community Justice Project. Your story has resonated with many of our clients. Would you be willing to speak with us about turning this into a broader advocacy effort? Samira stared at the message. She hadn't planned on becoming an activist. She had just wanted those officers to be held accountable for how they treated her. But maybe her father was right. Maybe she did have a platform and a voice that others didn't, and maybe she had a responsibility to use it. She typed a reply. Yes, I'd like to hear more about what you have in mind. As she pressed send, Samira felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just about one traffic stop anymore. It was about all the stops that happened every day, all the people who felt powerless in the face of authority, all the small injustices that added up to a broken system. The investigation was just the beginning. 1 week after her meeting with the police chief, Samira sat in a small conference room at the Community Justice Project offices. The walls were covered with posters advocating for various causes: bail reform, voting rights, police accountability. Around the table sat 5 people, all listening intently as Samira finished recounting her experience. That's exactly the kind of case we're documenting, said Zoe Walker, the woman who had texted Samira. Zoe was in her early 30s with close-cropped hair and intense eyes that seemed to take in everything. It starts with something minor like a flickering taillight, but quickly becomes about race or ethnicity. The problem is most people don't record these encounters, added Anthony, a former public defender now working with the project. And even when they do, they don't have the platform to make their voices heard. Samira nodded. That's what bothers me most. If I wasn't Judge Chen's daughter, if I hadn't posted that recording, nothing would have happened. My complaint would be sitting in a drawer somewhere. Which is why we want to create a more systematic approach, Zoe explained, pulling out a folder. We're developing an app that helps people record and document police encounters, automatically uploading the footage to secure servers so it can't be deleted or confiscated. We're also building a database to track patterns of behavior by department, precinct, and even individual officers. We've been doing this work for years, said Priya, another member of the team, but your case has created an opening. People are paying attention. The police department is on the defensive. We want to use this moment to push for real structural changes. Samira felt a mixture of pride and discomfort. She hadn't set out to become the face of a movement. She had just wanted those officers to be held accountable for how they treated her. What exactly are you asking me to do? She asked. 3 things, Zoe replied. First, we'd like you to speak at a community forum next week, where the police department will present the findings of their investigation into your case. Second, we'd like your help testing and promoting our new app. And third, we're hoping you might be willing to be a plaintiff in a broader civil action we're planning. Not just about your case, but about the pattern of biased policing it represents. Samira hesitated. I need to think about this and talk to my father. Of course, Zoe said. Take your time. But know that your voice carries weight right now. People are listening. As Samira left the meeting, her phone buzzed with a text from her father. Chief Richards called. The investigation is complete. They want to meet tomorrow at 2 p.m. That night, Samira couldn't sleep. Her mind kept bouncing between the investigation results, the Community Justice Project's proposals, and her own conflicted feelings. Was she becoming an activist by default? Would attaching her name to a civil action help or hinder the cause? And what about her studies, her future career? By morning, she still didn't have answers, but she did have a clearer sense of her priorities. She wanted accountability for the officers who had profiled her. She wanted systemic changes to prevent it from happening to others, and she wanted to use her unexpected platform thoughtfully. At 2 p.m. sharp, Samira and her father sat once again in Chief Richards' office. This time, Lieutenant Walsh was present as well, along with a woman introduced as Diane Powell from the Office of Professional Standards. We've completed our investigation, Chief Richards began, his tone formal. Ms. Powell will present the findings. Powell opened a folder. Based on the audio recording provided by Ms. Chen, dashcam footage from the patrol vehicle, and interviews with both officers, we have substantiated the complaint of improper conduct during a traffic stop. Officers Dawson and Reeves violated department policy by questioning Ms. Chen about her ethnicity and family origin without legitimate law enforcement purpose, attempting to search her vehicle without consent or probable cause, and intimidating her when she attempted to record the interaction. Samira felt a surge of vindication, but it was quickly tempered by her next thought. What happens now? As if reading her mind, Powell continued. Both officers have been suspended without pay for 2 weeks. Upon return, they will be required to complete additional training on constitutional policing, implicit bias, and proper stop procedures. They will also be on probationary status for 6 months, during which any similar violations will result in termination. Is that it? Judge Chen asked, his voice measured but with an edge of steel beneath. Chief Richards shifted in his seat. The officers have also agreed to issue a formal apology to your daughter. I don't want their apology, Samira said firmly. I want changes that will protect other people from being treated the way I was. The chief and Powell exchanged glances. We've also implemented some broader measures, Lieutenant Walsh spoke up. All officers will receive refresher training on constitutional requirements for searches and seizures. Supervisors will conduct random audits of body camera and dashcam footage to check for compliance, and we're revising our complaint process to make it more accessible and transparent. Judge Chen nodded slightly. These are positive steps, but they don't address the underlying issue of who you're stopping in the first place and why. We can't control who commits traffic violations. Judge, the chief replied, a defensive note creeping into his voice. No, but you can control which violations you choose to enforce and how you conduct those stops, Samira countered. The Community Justice Project has data showing that people of color are stopped at higher rates for minor infractions like broken taillights or air fresheners hanging from rear view. Mirrors. The chief looked surprised that she was citing statistics and mentioning the Community Justice Project. "You've been talking to Zoe Walker and her team," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Samira admitted. "They've invited me to speak at the community forum next week. I plan to accept." There was a moment of tension in the room. Chief Richards clearly hadn't expected Samira to align herself with what the department viewed as an adversarial group. "That's your right, of course," he finally said. "But I hope you'll acknowledge the steps we're taking to address your concerns." "I will," Samira assured him. "Just as I'll acknowledge how much more needs to be done." As they left the police station, Judge Chen placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "You handled yourself well in there." "I learned from the best," she replied with a small smile. "Are you sure about this community forum? Once you step into that role, it's hard to step back out." Samira nodded. "I'm sure. For a while I was worried about getting special treatment because of who you are, but now I understand it's not about using privilege for special treatment. It's about using it to make the system fairer for everyone." Her father's eyes filled with pride. "Your mother would have said the same thing." Across town, Officers Dawson and Reeves were cleaning out their lockers for their 2-week suspension. "This is garbage," Dawson muttered, shoving personal items into a gym bag. 2 weeks without pay over a routine stop. Reeves had been quiet all day. Now he turned to his partner. "It wasn't routine, and you know it. We messed up. We saw an Asian girl in a nice car and made assumptions. Don't tell me you're buying into all this sensitivity crap now." "It's not about sensitivity," Reeves argued. "It's about doing the job right. We're supposed to protect and serve everyone, not just people who look like us." "Since when did you become a social justice warrior?" Dawson scoffed. "Since I realized I could lose my job over this stuff," Reeves shot back. "You heard Walsh, we're on probation for 6 months. One more complaint and we're done. So what, we just stop doing our jobs? Let people get away with whatever because we're afraid of complaints? No, we do our jobs properly. Stop people when we have a legitimate reason. Question them about things that actually matter to the stop. Search when we have probable cause or consent. It's not complicated." Dawson slammed his locker shut. "Yeah, well, good luck with that approach when you're trying to get guns and drugs off the street. Better than being known as the cops who got taken down by a judge's daughter," Reeves replied. The next day, Samira met again with the team from the Community Justice Project. They were eager to hear about the investigation results. "It's a start?" Zoe said when Samira finished explaining the disciplinary actions. "Not nearly enough, but more than most complainants get." "The community forum is our chance to push for more," Anthony added. "We've invited city council members, community leaders, even state legislators. The media will be there too." "What exactly do you want me to say?" Samira asked. "Just tell your story," Priya suggested. "Talk about how it made you feel. How it changed your perspective. People connect with personal experiences more than statistics." Samira nodded. "I can do that. But I also want to be clear that this isn't just about me or those 2 officers. It's about a system that needs to change." "Perfect," Zoe smiled. "That's exactly the message we want to convey." As the meeting wrapped up, Samira checked her phone and found a text from Lily. "There are 2 police officers at our apartment asking to speak with you." "What should I tell them?" Samira felt a flash of anger. Officers Dawson and Reeves were supposed to be suspended. What were they doing at her apartment? "Tell them I'm not available," she texted back. "And if they don't leave, call my father." She immediately called her father as well. "Dad, those officers are at my apartment." Judge Chen's voice was calm but firm. "I'll handle it. Go to my house instead. We'll sort this out." By the time Samira arrived at her father's house, he was already on the phone with the police chief. "Your officers were explicitly instructed not to contact my daughter," he was saying, his courtroom voice in full effect. "Yet they showed up at her residence uninvited. If this is their idea of an apology, it's completely inappropriate and could be construed as intimidation of a complainant." He listened for a moment, then continued. "I expect this to be addressed immediately, Chief, and I want assurances that it won't happen again." After hanging up, he turned to Samira. "The chief claims he didn't authorize this. He's sending someone to intercept them now." "What were they thinking?" Samira wondered aloud. "They weren't," her father replied grimly, "and that's exactly the problem." The community center buzzed with energy as people filed in for the public forum. Television cameras were set up at the back of the room. Reporters huddled near the front, notebooks ready. Community members filled the rows of chairs, their faces reflecting a mix of hope, skepticism, and determination. Samira sat on the stage with Zoe from the Community Justice Project, Chief Richards, 2 city council members, and a moderator from a local civil rights organization. Her father sat in the front row, his expression neutral but his eyes alert, missing nothing. "I didn't expect this many people," Samira whispered to Zoe. "Your story touched a nerve," Zoe replied. "People see themselves in your experience." The moderator stepped to the microphone. "Good evening. Tonight's community forum on policing practices brings together community members, activists, police leadership, and city officials to discuss concerns raised by recent incidents and to explore paths forward." Samira listened as the moderator outlined the evening's agenda. Opening statements from each panelist, a presentation of the Community Justice Project's data on traffic stops, questions from the audience, and finally, discussion of proposed reforms. When it was her turn to speak, Samira approached the microphone with a flutter of nerves in her stomach. She had practiced what she wanted to say, but looking out at all those faces, some supportive, others clearly hostile, made her momentarily doubt herself. Then she caught her father's eye. He gave her a slight nod, and she felt her confidence return. 2 weeks ago, I was driving home from studying when I was pulled over for a supposedly flickering taillight, she began. What should have been a routine stop became something else entirely when the officers started questioning me about my ethnicity and family background, tried to search my car without cause, and became hostile when I attempted to record the interaction. She described the experience in detail, keeping her voice steady despite the anger and humiliation she still felt when thinking about that night. "I was lucky," she continued. "I knew my rights. I had the means to document what happened. And yes, I had connections that helped ensure my complaint was taken seriously. But most people stopped in similar circumstances don't have those advantages. Their complaints go nowhere. Their voices aren't heard. Their experiences are dismissed or denied." She paused, looking directly at Chief Richards. "The officers who stopped me have been disciplined, and the department has implemented some new training measures. That's a start. But it's not enough. We need systematic change in how officers are trained, in how they're held accountable, and most importantly, in how they view the communities they serve." When she finished, the audience erupted in applause. Chief Richards looked uncomfortable but maintained his composure. The forum continued with Zoe presenting data showing racial disparities in traffic stops across the city. People in certain neighborhoods were 3 times more likely to be stopped for minor infractions, and those stops were twice as likely to result in searches, despite finding contraband less frequently than in stops of white drivers. When it was time for audience questions, a middle-aged woman stood up. "My son was stopped 4 times last month driving to his night shift job. 4 times in 1 month for things like a license plate light being out or suspicious driving. How is he supposed to trust the police after that?" Chief Richards leaned forward. "I can't speak to specific cases without details, but I can tell you we're reviewing our policies on pretextual stops. Officers need legitimate safety reasons to pull someone over, not just hunches or vague suspicions." Another community member, an older man, spoke next. "Words are nice, Chief, but we've heard promises before. What's different this time?" Before the chief could answer, the back door of the community center opened. A hush fell over the room as Officer Dawson walked in, followed by Officer Reeves. They were in civilian clothes, having been suspended, but everyone seemed to recognize them instantly. Samira felt her heart rate accelerate. Why were they here? Her father half rose from his seat, but Samira caught his eye and shook her head slightly. She wanted to see what would happen. The officers didn't try to speak or disrupt the meeting. They simply took seats in the back row. Their presence alone created a ripple of tension through the room. Chief Richards cleared his throat. "To answer your question, sir, what's different this time is the level of transparency and accountability we're committed to. The Community Justice Project has proposed an independent review board with real oversight powers. We're open to that conversation." This announcement caused murmurs of surprise throughout the audience. The chief hadn't mentioned this openness to independent oversight in any previous discussions. The forum continued for another hour, with community members sharing experiences and officials responding with varying degrees of defensiveness or receptivity. Throughout it all, Officers Dawson and Reeves sat silently in the back. As the moderator was wrapping up, Officer Reeves suddenly stood. "May I speak?" he asked. The moderator looked uncertainly at the panel. Zoe and the council members frowned, but Samira nodded slightly. She was curious about what he had to say. "Briefly," the moderator allowed. Reeves walked to the center aisle. "I'm one of the officers who stopped Miss Chen 2 weeks ago. I'm not here to defend my actions or my partners. What we did was wrong. We saw a young Asian woman in a nice car and made assumptions based on nothing but our own biases." The room was completely silent now. "I've been a cop for 12 years, Reeves continued, "and for most of that time I thought I was one of the good ones. But listening tonight, hearing Miss Chen and others describe how our actions affected them, made me realize something. It doesn't matter how you see yourself if your actions harm others." He turned to face Samira directly. "I wanted to apologize to you in person, not because my department ordered me to, but because I need to. I was wrong. I'm sorry." Beside him, Officer Dawson remained seated, arms crossed, expression stony. Samira wasn't sure how to respond. She hadn't expected a genuine apology, especially not in such a public forum. Before she could formulate a reply, her father stood up. "Officer Reeves," Judge Chen said, his voice carrying throughout the room without a microphone, "I appreciate your apology to my daughter, but the real test will be in your actions going forward. How you treat the next young person you stop who doesn't happen to be a judge's daughter." Reeves nodded solemnly. "Yes, sir. I understand." As the forum broke up, people clustered in small groups discussing what they'd heard. Several approached Samira to share their own stories or offer support. Reporters tried to get statements from the chief and council members. In the midst of this, Samira noticed Officer Dawson slip out the back door. Officer Reeves, however, lingered nearby, seemingly waiting for a chance to speak with her more directly. When there was a lull in the conversations around her, Reeves approached cautiously. "Miss Chen, I meant what I said up there. I'm truly sorry for how we treated you." Samira studied his face, looking for signs of insincerity or manipulation. She saw none. "Why did you come to my apartment the other day?" she asked. Reeves looked genuinely confused. "What?" "I didn't come to your apartment, you and Officer Dawson. My roommate texted me that you were there asking for me." Reeves shook his head. "That wasn't me. I've been home with my family since the suspension started." "Are you sure it was Dawson?" A chill ran down Samira's spine. If it wasn't Reeves with Dawson, who was the other officer? Her father appeared at her side, having overheard the conversation. "Officer Reeves, did your partner ever express any anger or resentment toward my daughter after the complaint was filed?" Reeves hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. He was upset, felt like his career was being ruined over nothing, but I never thought he'd do anything about it. Judge Chen pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Lieutenant Walsh. If Dawson is trying to intimidate a complainant, that's grounds for immediate termination." While her father made the call, Samira noticed Zoe approaching with a reporter. "Samira, this is Tina from the Tribune. She's doing a feature on our new app and wanted to get your perspective as someone who's been through the complaint process." For the next hour, Samira was caught up in interviews, conversations, and planning sessions with the Community Justice Project team. By the time things wound down, Lieutenant Walsh had arrived and was getting details from Officer Reeves about Dawson's recent behavior and comments. As Samira prepared to leave with her father, Zoe pulled her aside. "You were amazing tonight. The way you told your story, how you handled Reeves's apology, it was perfect." "Thanks," Samira said. "But it doesn't feel like an ending yet." "It's not," Zoe agreed. "It's a beginning." The chief agreeing to consider an independent review board? That's huge. And having an officer publicly acknowledge bias? That's practically unheard of. "So what happens now?" Samira asked. "Now the real work begins," Zoe replied, turning tonight's words into lasting change. "Are you still with us?" Samira thought about everything that had happened since that traffic stop 2 weeks ago. How it had changed her perspective, her priorities, maybe even her career path. "Yes," she said firmly. "I'm with you." 3 months later, Samira stood outside City Hall with her father, Zoe, and dozens of community activists. They watched as the mayor signed an ordinance establishing an independent police oversight board with real enforcement powers. Officer Reeves was there too, now working with the department's newly expanded Community Relations Unit. Officer Dawson was gone, fired after an investigation confirmed he had attempted to intimidate Samira by showing up at her apartment with another officer who shared his views. "We did it," Zoe said, squeezing Samira's arm excitedly. "We started it," Samira corrected her. "There's still so much more to do." Her father overheard and smiled proudly. "One case at a time," he said. "One story at a time. That's how change happens." As they walked back to campus together, Samira reflected on how a routine traffic stop had altered her life's trajectory. She had entered law school thinking she would follow her father into the judiciary. Now she was considering civil rights law, police reform advocacy, maybe even politics. What hadn't changed was her belief in justice, not just for those with connections or platforms, but for everyone, especially those whose stories rarely got heard, and she knew whatever path she chose, she would keep telling those stories, including her own.